Hi, I'm Martin Jarvis, and once again I want to welcome you to another perspective. Today we're going to talk about spirituality. Spirituality after religion. You know, we have this idea that spirituality and religion are synonymous, but I want to challenge that. Religion is a choice. Spirituality is simply the foundation of every human being. And let me try to give a definition that makes this easier to understand. The difference between spirit and soul. The soul is the emotional part of us, that part of us that has reactions, has responses, influences us to become the person that we are based on our experiences, our environment, and everything that we run into. We've heard the old saying that, well, a man is the sum total of all his experiences. And that's the soul part, okay, in response to everything. Who we have become, who we are, it is the soul part of us, what dictates, who we've chosen to be. And I don't want to say chosen to be maybe, because that makes us in control. But the soul is the influence that influences us to who we actually are. A lot of times what we think we've chosen is simply a result of the influence of the soul, which has given us a perspective on things, which has influenced whatever our thoughts are about a particular thing. So the soul part of us has already made the determination, and we consciously are simply responding to the reality that our soul has placed before us. Is that too deep? Okay. So the soul part is like the emotions and the feelings and all that stuff that moves us to do the things that we do, okay? And the spirit part of us has no emotion. It's just the reality of what is, okay? And I think the best way I can explain it is looking at a human being like you or me and comparing us to a fetus, okay? Where a fetus is just existing. It's neither happy or sad. It's not considering the weather or mad at people for being the way they are, any of the type of emotions that we experience, because there's none of that. And so then to me, the fetus is like the most, the purest form of spirituality that any human being can ever attain. It's in that fetus stage because it hasn't been exposed to anything that soul can respond to, okay? And so maybe we might find, the discomfort, or based on the environment that the mother happens to be living in or living through, and so then there is that bit of soul that might be affecting the fetus in such a way, but not even involving its conscious thought, okay? And so recognize that. And so that's what we're going to talk about, because it's very important for us if we want to I want to say, attain a more positive life, even a positive outlook on life. And it's the outlook that will affect us, in so much that we do. And I guess the purpose of this is getting back to where we are wondering why we're not as successful as we could be, why we're not as happy as we could be, we're not as content as we believe we should be. What I'm suggesting is because there are issues that are affecting us, and these are the soul issues that are affecting us, that are keeping us from attaining our peace of mind and all. So I've chosen religion and spirituality as this topic, to how to get to a place of spirituality outside of religion, or transcending religion. And I think it's very important. I think it's a lot easier to get to a place of true spirituality, well, the truest that we can, in this form at all, having transcended a religion or going through a religion. Because religions give us, in their truest sense, at least they should, at least an idea of the difference between good and evil, okay? What is good, what is bad. But oftentimes, because of that soulish influence, the church itself buys into often things that are not good, things that it has justified within itself, like maybe the mistreatment of a people, or the exploitation of a people, or greed, or responding out of fear, and all that stuff. So the religion in itself, none of the religions are actually the pinnacle of spirituality that we can aspire to attain through the religion. But it sort of gives us a starting point to give us an idea on things that are good and things that are bad. Because when we come into this world as that innocent slate, that spiritually minded fetus, and immediately we're thrust into this world that is simply, in totality, a creation of everyone's soulish impulses. And so we're thrust into the light, which is a creation. Many times we're backed, by the doctor, which is also generating a soulish response from an impulse that was soulishly created. And then basically everything in life that we're exposed to after that. We go to our parents' home and we get to become victims to whatever they've been exposed to, whatever negativities they've experienced in their lives. And so we begin to get attitudes and opinions based on the homes we come up in. We can have mistreatment or harsher treatment than we should because of the soulish influences in the lives of our parents. So we come into this world empty, innocent, spiritually engulfed more than at any other time in our human experience, but it's like immediately when we come into this world we're exposed to the soul and the soul responses. So what we're trying to do then is find a way to get beyond that, okay? And it's not easy. I mean, it's easier again if you go through a religion. That's why it's transcending the religion and all. Because you really have no basis to determine good versus evil. You are simply either the beneficiaries or the victims to the households in which you were raised, in the environment which you were raised. If you were raised in Syria during the Aleppo issues, with all that bombardment of bombs and weapons and killing and murder, and you were born into that and lived through that up into your toddler and early years, you're going to have one particular perspective of humanity based on the experiences that you lived through. Okay. Now, if you were born and raised on a tropical island where everything was nice and peaceful and wonderful, and the weather was great and the people were great, and that was your experience, you're going to have a whole different view of humanity from that. If you were born in the deepest part of the ghetto or something, in a terrible situation, or if you were born in Appalachia, with ma and pa kettle and everything, you're going to have varying views of humanity based on your soul, on the soulish response that you have to the environment you were raised in. So then it's very difficult to determine what is good and what is evil. Because all you have to weigh it against are the experiences that you've lived through, okay? And so the religion then gives an individual an opportunity to recognize, or at least delineate, the difference between what is accepted in society as good and evil, but still you can get a foundation from that. But in order to attain that spirituality, that positive spirituality that's not affected by negativities, you're going to have to step back and even look at the religions and recognize what kind of things are not quite right. Now you can look at the religion in early Americas, where many Christians were slave owners and perpetrators of that type attitude, or genocided Native Americans and taught them the Bible and changed their names to biblical names and all that good stuff. These were a lot of times the preachers and the priests and the nuns and all that stuff. So that wasn't good, right? So those are exaggerated examples, but even today, where we find with Christians taking particular political stances that might seem to be without heart or without feeling or without empathy to many people who are suffering. Okay, So it's very important then, although religion is a very good place to be able to see firsthand good versus evil, devil versus God, or or the good guys versus the bad guys and all. But even with the religions, they're sort of biased as far as the protagonist versus the antagonist. If you're not part of my religion, then you are the antagonist. If you're a part of my religion, you're the protagonist. If you're part of my denomination or my sect, then you are the protagonist. So there's a lot of issues that are still spewing forth from religions, that if you want to attain that good place of spirituality, you're going to have to challenge. You're going to have to challenge the religion. You're going to have to challenge yourself. You're going to have to challenge your perceived truths, because what you believe, might be not quite right. And see, I'm speaking not from theory, but from experience. As I was raised in the church, and I went to the military at 17. For the next 10 years, I was an atheist, a true atheist. I wasn't an angry atheist. I wasn't mad at religious people. If you believed in Mickey Mouse, I wouldn't be mad at you, so I wasn't one of those guys. But I knew that there was no deity. Whatever you are, Allah, Yahweh, God, whatever you wanted to call it. And so I came to a point where, when I was about 28 years old, I had this epiphany at home one day by myself that there was something greater than me. And it was at that determination I decided to change me based on recognizing that I wasn't the person that I should be. I wasn't the person that I wanted to be. And so I began this journey. I began the journey, as I've shared on other programs, of just removing everything out of my apartment that reflected the individual that I no longer was. And my apartment was empty that morning. And then I began filling my apartment with things that represented who I believed that I was, and who I believed that I wanted to be, who I believed I should be. And this has been the journey, man. I'll be 67 this year. It's almost 40 years, a lot of years. 2025. And so one of the keys, I was determined that I was going to change, but I also recognized the pull that the church I came up in had on me, because that was the influence I had. But I had recalled one of the reasons I became an atheist, because as a young person, so much that I had seen in that church, I realized couldn't possibly be true. I saw a lot of negativities, a lot of terrible things, a lot of racism, and adulteries, and all these things that seemed to go against the teachings of Christ. And yet these folks believed that they were well with God and nobody else was. And as a young person, it was like, I can't buy this. So when I had this epiphany, what I want to call it, I determined that I was going to walk in a different way, after deity, after that which I believed was greater than me. But I was not going to simply go back and just become the person that church that I was raised in expressed that people should be. I was going to seek truth for myself, and it's been that kind of journey. Now we're talking about how to get to that spiritual place beyond religion, okay? So of course I embraced religion, because that was all I knew as the opposite of what I was. But I was determined that I was going to find truth for myself. Now that's a righteous way to think, but it's not that easy for most folks. I think, but if you're coming from a place of being an atheist, it's an easy place to come. You're going to find truth for yourself. So I decided that day, this is my new journey, a seeker of truth. And to be a seeker of truth, you have to determine within yourself, and this is what I did, that everything that I believed about life, about goodness, about God, about religion, about religions, whatever I believed was probably wrong. That was my foundation. So the only way to make a foundation like this of discovery, to find that true spirituality beyond religion, is to determine that everything that you have believed, everything that you have bought into, is probably not true. And let's just go from there. See, a lot of folks, what they'll do is they want to seek truth, but they'll have these certain things that are etched in stone. I'm going to find truth, but these things are the things that I must maintain, okay? Well, if you do that, you're not really searching for truth. You have to put everything on the table. You have to say nothing's off limits. Whatever I see, whatever I understand, whatever I begin to sense, in my journey, I'll challenge myself to it. And if it makes more sense than what I've embraced, then I'm going to let go of what I've embraced. I'm not going to maintain anything simply because Mama told me, Daddy told me, this is the way the church that I was going to interprets this, interprets that, or whatever. No, I'm seeking truth myself, okay? And if it challenges what I believe, I'm going to weigh it, and I'm going to go with what makes most sense. And that's where I've, I guess, departed away from many folks, even within the Christian religion. Now see, I'm a believer, but there are things that just don't make any sense, and I'm not embracing those things, okay? And so that can be a lonely journey, okay? Because most people are not comfortable challenging themselves or challenging the things they've always believed. It's like if you're sharing with someone something that they hadn't heard before, what they're going to do is run it through the sieve of what they already believe. And if it conflicts with what they've already chosen to believe, whether what they've chosen to believe makes any sense or not, they're going to reject what they hear. And so there is no journey. That's religion, okay? But we want to get past religion so we can do well. And it's just a matter of challenging yourself and allowing that challenge, man. Hell? No, I don't think there's a hell. I do believe you reap what you sow, but that's here, man. I mean, come on, we live through it all the time. If you don't do what you're supposed to do financially, you're going to reap what you've sown, okay? If you don't treat people the way they're supposed to be treated good, there's going to be ramifications for that affecting your life, okay? And so there's a simplicity in truth that we have been so influenced through our soul by folks with agendas, like manipulative agendas, that we have bought into so much religious structure that we've just accepted it as being gospel truth, okay? Now, so the religion itself, religions were created from a soulish influence. Now, soul doesn't mean a bad motivation, okay? It just means a motivation that is outside of a spiritual reality. And so even the intentions for the building the religion are good. May be to help people walk the right way or to do right or have a support system in place in case folks need it and all. Or maybe you have another religion created for the people that this religion ostracized, giving these people that support system that they needed, to be well. So these religions, I believe, were created for good intentions, but still they were created out of the soul, not of the pure spirituality that we once were. Now we are simply moved by the influences and environments that we dwell in, and so we respond accordingly. As the religions, all of them, have a soul foundation. When I say religions, I mean the holy books too. Come on, who wrote the holy books? Human beings wrote the holy books, influenced by their soul, by their experiences, by what they believed to be true. All that, every holy book, in their totality, were created by men, influenced by their soul. And I'm not saying there were negative intentions. I'm simply saying that we just need to get a few things straight. That religions and holy books, their foundations are soulish. Human beings, our foundation is spiritual, okay? But the moment we come into the world, we're influenced by the soulish influences from the moment we pop into this world. And our spirit is so innocent. It simply takes back seat to the soul as we are experiencing everything that is through all of our senses. We are experiencing everything, and in a sense, that's how we become what we are. That's how we learn to walk. That's how we learn to talk. That's how we learn to eat. That's how we understand everything that we're understanding moment by moment through our lives. It's through our soul, okay? And so I'm sharing with you today how to transcend religion to spirit. It's never going to be possible, really, because we are who we are now. Okay, we cannot go back to that fetal place. We've been influenced. We function in the soul. This is who we are. The best we can do is to try to be good, okay? And so that's allowing that spiritual aspect of us to actually help guide us to the soulish things that we experience that are the good things, okay? And that's very difficult as well, because people are suffering. People are suffering all over this world and in this nation as well. Like the border crossings, down there south of our nation, down there south of the border. Okay, and it's quite easy to recognize that we have to keep this for ourselves. That we can't just support everybody that comes over here. We can have all these kind of attitudes that make rational sense. But the reality, even that rational sense, is from the soulish realm. And so you to transcend that soulish realm, you're going to have to challenge yourself in that seeing all human beings as equal and having an empathy for human beings who are suffering. Okay, and that is not easy for anyone, but it is challenging. And even the how I opened up here when we were talking about the fetus is the most truest, purest sense of spirituality that a human being will ever experience. That's challenging too, because there are good people who believe that abortions are okay. And so when I give you something like that, automatically you pull back because you've run it through your belief system. And if this fetus is the most spiritual individual that will ever be in his life, and the most spiritual that I've ever been when I was a fetus, and that you were when you were a fetus, because you weren't influenced by the world and by emotions and all that. It's hard to embrace that when you are a proponent of pro-choice. And see, me personally, I'm pro-life and pro-choice. I'm not political about this thing. I just had this revelation, what I believe is a revelation, about the spirituality of a fetus. I'm not making any kind of political or social statement. And I shared this with somebody, a believer who's really pro-life and everything, not from a political or social perspective. This is this insight that I believe I had regarding the spirituality of a fetus. And so I was like, wait, so what are you going to do about it now? That you see, nothing. Because I'm not political and I'm not social. I don't see that really as an issue as it's compared to so many other issues that we're dealing with in this world. So it's just a reality, a revelation that I believe that I had, and it makes sense when you consider the definition of soul and the definition of spirit, and a fetus hasn't been exposed to any of those things that require that soul response. Okay, so the bottom line really is we're never going to get there to that place of spirituality. The best we can do is just try to be good. And so try to be good. So how do you try to be good? What do we have to do to get there? Well, the first thing we can do as parents is to make sure that we have special homes. When I say special homes, I mean a home that really strives to determine what is good and what is bad and impart that into your children. There are certain things that I know that I think or that I feel that aren't quite, that are kind of soulish, right? But I'll share those with my kids. I share the goodness. I mean, my children, they exercise more than I do. They probably eat more healthy than I do. I mean, they're grown, they're adults. So it's like, I understand my failings, but we can raise our kids not to have the failings that we have, okay? Not to have those issues that we have. So have a special home, where we strive to guide our children to what is good, even if it goes contrary to what we've thought or what we've believed. We come up in a nation so polarized, by racial, by race and by nationalistic feelings and all that stuff. But we have to come to the point to realize that that's really not right, because we're all human beings. And so even if I feel this way, I'm going to try not to raise my children to be exposed to the negativities about my life that I can't seem to shake, you know. So that's number one, to have a special home, okay? Number two is to really, really realize that church is not a spiritual place. That church is totally soul-driven. And realizing that soul-driven doesn't mean it's all bad. Soul-driven doesn't mean it's all good. It's just soul-driven. So if you want to embrace that spiritual side, you're going to have to transcend a rigid system of rules and exercises that you must participate in to be well with the Creator. That's the soul, man. So see, I found that as a minister, especially in the juvenile detention center, for like 17 years, speaking to those kids for 17 years every week, that I would find that I could easily give a message that will scare them into, you know, coming to the altar, okay? But that isn't real. That is a manipulative technique that many preachers have used for hundreds of years to scare people, you know, into coming to the altar, and that usually doesn't last. But it's still not right. It's a bondage. It's a bondage of sorts, because you're only doing this thing because you're afraid of being destroyed in hell or something to that effect. Okay? Where I found when people simply felt good around you, felt the love, felt the concern, and were not threatened or anything, but you lived your life in such a way that these folks looking at you wanted what you have. That was a good way. Now, it's still all soul, but it's still delineating a difference between the manipulative aspect of soul versus the drawing of an individual in love, okay? So recognize that the church is the culprit, not the helper. Church is very helpful and convenient for like fellowship, and for somewhere to go, like a system where you can go to when you're struggling or when you're failing and you need encouragement. But as far as getting you to that level of spirituality that you would like to attain, that will happen outside of the church. The church has a particular mission that's on this level. You want to surpass that and get to the next level. It's going to take a challenge, because our religious institutions are very important to us. Whether it's the churches, whether it's the mosque, you know, whether it's the synagogue, whatever. And it's very difficult for us to challenge that. But you must challenge it, because it's almost like you're in some kind of game, you know, and you're trying to get to a destination, but in order to get to the destination, you have to get past this barrier. That barrier is the church, is the religion. That's what we're going to close with. Finding your way back to a spiritual place. Less controlled by your soul, your emotions, things you want to do, the things that you'd rather do, all that stuff, is to begin doing the things that you know you should do, even when you don't feel like doing it, even when it goes against everything that you're feeling. That's how you defeat the soul. Now, you might say your determination to defeat the soul is the soul too. That's a philosophical argument, but as long as you're driving toward that place of good. So for example, I mean, most of us, say Americans, most people in the world are used to living and eating unhealthy. Okay, I'm going to start eating healthy. Because of all of my influences and environments I came up with, I'm motivated to eat unhealthy, okay? So I'm going to challenge that. As far as the exercise, the workout, a person may not have worked out in years, but I'm going to start working out now, because everything inside of me would rather just sit on the couch and watch TV, you know, rather than go to a gym or the basement and work out for an hour and a half. So make that determination. It's everything within me from my influences are telling me just to remain sedentary, not to eat right, man. But then you're destroying yourself, so it's not good. So this is again where we find ourselves in a place where we we'll never be able to exit out of the soul influences. That is simply who we are today. But what we can do is at least try to adjust the soulish influences in our lives so that we will be embracing simply the good and not the bad, all right? That is the best we can do. We'll never be out of this, but we can fix ourselves to be positively influenced via our soul and embrace those things which do us well than to embrace those things which are harmful to us. And that's pretty much it. I know I'm going deep here. I hope you got it. I hope you feel it. I do want to thank you once again for joining me for another perspective. And I want to invite you to join me again. You take care. Bye.